Welcome back to Eliances Heroes, where heroes in business align. To be part of our super community and find out more about Eliances, visit www.Eliances.com.
That's right, and we're back with me, David Kogan, host of the Eliances Heroes Show. It's going to be another incredible segment, and you're going to want to make sure that you listen real closely because we've got the person who knows podcasting almost better than anybody else. And by the way, thanks for the feedback again we continue to have when I interviewed Adam Carolla. So make sure that you go to Eliances.com to listen to that past interview. That's ELIANCER.com. Because once again, this is David Kogan, host of the Eliances Hero Show. Well, welcome to the show, Steve Olsher. He is, are you ready for this? The founder and editor-in-chief of Podcasting Magazine. If that wasn't enough, New York Times bestselling author, What is Your What? And also the original founder of Liquor.com. Welcome to the show, Steve Olsher.
Hey, thanks, David. Appreciate you.
All right, so let's get into it. First of all, this is so cool that you created and became the editor-in-chief of Podcaster Magazine. I mean, something that would seem so obvious that it should have already been out there. You came up with it. You created it. Talk to us about it.
Yeah. So officially Podcast Magazine, keep it simple and keep it short, right? So it's really all about, the best way to put it is it's a consumer-facing magazine. So what we do is we introduce our readers to shows that they may not be listening to, but would definitely enjoy. We sit down with people who have made a name for themselves in the world of podcasting. And ultimately, we just go beyond the microphone, if you will, with today's leading podcasters and behind the scenes of the stories that podcast fans really can't get enough of. So it's really all things podcasting from a consumer standpoint, as opposed to being something for podcasters.
And where can people learn directly about Podcast Magazine?
Right there at podcastmagazine.com, right? Keep it simple.
Awesome. So the idea that came up with this, talk to us about some of the articles or maybe some of the things that kind of surprised you about this, because it's so cool and there's so many podcasts going on now.
From our standpoint, we felt like there was a definite opportunity here to create something that was a consumer-facing publication, given everything that's going on in the world of podcasts and just how tricky it is for a lot of podcasts to be found. I mean, unless you're Will Ferrell or NPR or ESPN or somebody like that. I mean, you just really hard to get found in the just slew of shows right now. There's well over 1,200,000 podcasts right now. So we, as podcasters ourselves, we knew that discovery is a challenge and really wanted to try to level the playing field as best that we could for all podcasters. And so, yeah, we do sit down with some bigger names, the Katie Courics and Dave Ramseys of the world, those sort of people, which is great. But ultimately, what makes us the happiest is, as I mentioned earlier, is introducing podcast fans around the world to every month hundreds of shows that they're not potentially familiar with, but definitely should be listening to.
Now, you mentioned about so many out there. Do you have any statistics about how many actually, what the time frame is of ones that last? Because a lot of people think, it's easy. I get into it, grab a mic, start talking to someone. But how long? And it's got to be a bit of a churn rate too.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a churn rate on it. The fact of the matter is right now there's about 1,200,000 podcasts. That just means in terms of the total number of podcasts that are available, which of course pales in comparison to the number of YouTube channels and social media channels and so on and so forth. But regardless, 1,200,000 is still a lot of shows to weed through. Best guess, based on most recent stats that I've seen, is that only about 40% of those shows are still in active production. And only about 40% of those shows actually have 10 or more episodes that are readily available and again, are consistent in terms of production. So when you come right down to it, it's about 23% of the available podcasts that are still producing content on a regular basis and have 10 or more episodes.
Excellent. Well, we've beat those stats because we're continuing. We're doing a lot of episodes every week. We've been doing this for years and getting incredible people like Steve Olsher, the founder and editor-in-chief of Podcast Magazine. And again, New York Times bestselling author, What is Your What? You can reach him at steveolsher.com. And of course, we'll have it on our website. You can go to Eliances.com to listen to past episodes, ELIANCER.com, because you're with me, host David Kogan of the Eliances Hero Show. So, Steve, what are some of the best ways, because we're getting some questions in, of the best ways really to get podcast exposure? So, for example, with your magazine, is there a paid portion too where people can advertise and say, you got to come listen to my show? What are some of the other things maybe perhaps they can do?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously there's magazines going to have advertising opportunities. I do believe, just based on a lot of the things that we do for our clients, is that there's a huge amount of opportunity for not only, of course, podcasters to get booked on other podcasts, but to that end, I would also say that no matter what your industry is, no matter what your niche is, if you're a coach, an author, a speaker, a small business owner, solopreneur, holistic practitioner, et cetera, there are an enormous number of shows out there that are looking for guests. So I actually believe that the best way to get started in the industry right now is, of course, to listen to shows, make sure that you actually like the medium. But then further to that, start by guesting on shows. Lots of opportunity out there right now for that.
How do you make money off of podcasting?
You can look at podcasting as a business in terms of being able to line up sponsors and getting people to pay for access to your audience and so on. But reality is there's very few people that are going to be able to make money from the standpoint of looking at their podcast as a business. I mean, somebody like a Joe Rogan who has 190 million monthly downloads. I mean, that's a whole other story. But for most mere mortals, they have to look at podcasting as it in a different light in terms of looking at it from the standpoint of podcasting as a business, in terms of the business of podcasting that involves other products and programs and services and so on that complement what you're doing with the podcast, but you're not relying on the podcast itself to generate the leads and revenue that you need in order to create a scalable and sustainable business.
Talk to me about some of the articles, maybe perhaps that stand out most to you.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been doing this now for 5 months. Our sixth issue is dropping next month, right? So we've had the opportunity to sit down with just really amazing people from all levels of the podcasting spectrum. And what's really interesting to me is that, I mean, I've done my own shows. I've had my own podcasts since 2009 with Reinvention Radio, and then more recently with Beyond Eight Figures. One of the things that I've come to realize is that even some of the more quote unquote popular people, those that you would think would be more just a little more difficult to work with, actually are some of the more down-to-earth people that you've ever met. So I do think that there's a tie that binds people who jump into the realm of podcasting, and at their core, most people who come into the mix of podcasting really are servant leaders, and really do want to give first, and that comes across in the interviews that we conduct, really at no matter what level of success, if we're going to use that term, that the podcaster has realized.
Excellent. What are some of the secrets you can share in regards to really what someone should do when they're podcasting, and maybe some of the things that they should actually avoid?
What we teach and what I believe in is super important at this juncture is to leverage what I call the new media trifecta, which is basically where your brand and your podcast and your online course or core offering are all of the same name and all of the same focus. In other words, when you think about jumping into this world of podcasting, just be really, really clear in terms of who it is that you are most compelled to serve and the niche in which you operate, right? The vertical that you want to really make a name for yourself in, or as we like to say, having real clarity around the conversation that you most want to be a part of, and then creating a brand and a podcast and an online course that are all of the same name. And if you can accomplish that, you'll be pretty golden moving forward, because search is really what dominates the world of podcasting. and ultimately, you're going to have a hard time competing with people that have really deep pockets. So you got to think about it in terms of search.
Excellent. Well, Steve, you definitely are a pioneer in so many ways. You help educate and help people reinvent themselves and their businesses. That's a hero. Steve Olsher, founder and editor in chief of Podcast Magazine. Check out his book, What is Your What? And go to steveolsher.com. This has been David Kogan with the Eliances Hero Show.